All right, let's talk about the running backs at the top of our rankings. We have Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Aaron Jones. And I would say that you could probably make an argument for a few guys who could be in the top three. Jeff, how do you see the top three at the position right now?
I think you could also make the argument for Derrick Henry in there. I might slide him into the top three instead of Jones. And it's not a knock on Jones. It's just that matchup's tough. There's no doubt about it, especially with Darius Leonard on the field. This guy is an absolute difference maker. And we saw that really was the difference. When he was out, a good defense, not a great defense. When he's in, they're a great defense. Whereas Henry also facing a great defense, but a defense that has been prone to give up some big games in the run game. So I think obviously Cook, no matter what, even in the week 10 contest, he had 30 carries. I mean, you didn't get the fantasy outcome maybe you were hoping for, but he can't post video game numbers every single week. And Kamara, even though Jameis may not look to him as much in the checkdowns, he's still, outrageously good. So I think Henry's the guy who maybe slides into that top three.
Yeah, as a Cowboys fan, even if I could go see the Cowboys in Minnesota this weekend, I wouldn't do it. Just because I'm not going to want to go into like an enemy stadium and then watch their running back run all over the Dallas defense. So I'm just anticipating that is going to be a bloodbath and something that will be very painful to witness. Jeff, outside of the guys that you already mentioned, who are some guys you are relatively high on at the position?
Well, I think the first name that we have to talk about is Savon Ahmed. Came out of nowhere seemingly, and this is the second time with this coaching staff, so maybe we shouldn't be surprised that a running back has come up the depth chart and out of nowhere seemingly and then became the guy. Heading into the season, fantasy football players have this irrational love of Jordan Howard. Maybe that ends now. Maybe that was the last time we'll see Jordan Howard. I don't know what this dude had to do over the last 4 seasons for us to finally wake up to the fact that he was just a guy. I actually went through my Twitter and looked at all my Jordan Howard mentions over the last 3 years. If you ever want something entertaining, do that. But, we saw Myles Gaskin take the ball and run with it. We saw the team willing to give him a 3-down workload. And then you had a whole bunch of Jags, Jordan Howard, Patrick Laird. You have a Perry, who's a converted college option quarterback. And then Matt Breida even as well, who could be back this week, but I'm not convinced Matt Breida is anything more than a change of pace guy. The team gave Ahmed 22 touches this past week. I think he gets another full workload in a game where they should absolutely mop the floor with Denver. Denver could have Brett Rippon under center with the way Miami's defense is playing, with the way that Ahmed is playing. He's really interesting. The other name on my list is Deandre Swift. And really it comes down to not just, okay, hey, it's going to happen next week. It already happened. He took over in that backfield. It happened last week. 43 snaps for him. Kerryon Johnson, 9 snaps. Adrian Peterson, just 7. So now we have clarity here. And how about Matt Patricia back up against the wall? They were literally going to fire him if he lost one more game, and he didn't. And now they're starting to win. Now they're not a great team, but they're playing better, and Swift is a big part of it. So I think that he obviously is a player, not just based on last week, but a player that we obviously need to continue to be moving up in our ranks and targeting in DFS.
Yeah, it's really been nice to see Swift come on because entering the league, especially going through the combine process and then going through the draft, you could see how athletic he was. And before he was drafted, he was my number 1 player in dynasty rookie drafts. After landing in Detroit, he fell down the board, but man, he's really taken advantage of the opportunities that he's gotten, and he looks like he could be a future star, which would be fantastic to see there for the Detroit Lions fans. Sean, who are you high on at the running back position?
Well, I feel terrible because I know for a fact I'm stealing Raybon's guys here, but if anything, this just makes me feel better that I'm high on these guys. But LaMichael P Rein, he's priced like they didn't see the news last week where they're anticipating him to be the feature back the rest of the season because they're in talent evaluation mode. So I love him at this price. The lead back for the Jets has a pretty limited ceiling, but I think he should come close to that. And then Duke Johnson, Duke was just a chalk bust last week, to say the least. But he saw every single carry. I don't even know who their backup is. We still don't know. And he ran around on 74% of dropbacks, yet didn't haul in a catch. So I think that changes this week. People will probably be off of him after last week, but he's still too cheap at 5,400. So I'm doubling down on Duke Johnson this week.
All right. Well, this is great because Raybon has put 3 names in the outline. Sean, you hit 2 of them, and I'm going to hit the third one, Raybon. Sorry, I'm just going to jump ahead of you in line here. The guy I am pretty high on is Antonio Gibson. And I'm looking at him as a mid-range RB1 this week, which might really sound aggressive. And it is. But if you take away the season opener, we're looking at a guy in his past 8 games who has 7 touchdowns and almost 600 yards. He's getting goal line opportunities. He has 3.5 targets per game, and he's going against a Bengals defense that is number 25 in PFF run defense grade. So I think a lot of things are lining up for him. And even though JD McKissick is a very annoying thorn in the side, getting way more snaps, way more targets than I think he probably should be getting, I still see a pretty high floor and a path to some upside for Antonio Gibson this week, given the matchup and the usage that he has. And then also just his all-around natural talent. Raybon, why don't you tell us the 3 guys you are high on this week?
I mean, you guys just hit on them. Gibson, Duke Johnson, and LaMichael P Rein. And I think with P Rein, the key is what Sean said. We got this news that they're going to evaluate P Rein for better or worse, which means we should see them stick with him, even if he doesn't have the quote unquote hot hand in this matchup. He's their best pass catching back regardless. So, even if the game script gets away from the Jets against the Chargers, who are, I think, an 8.5 point favorite, we should still see decent production out of P Rein. Remember, we saw another kind of unheralded guy in Ahmed produce last week against the Chargers. So I like P Rein. Duke, agree. I think you just have to kind of throw out last week with the Texans. That was an odd game. But you look at that backfield in Houston, and whether it's been Crennel or Bill O'Brien, it's been one guy really in that backfield, and the number 2 back, who in this case would be CJ Procise, I guess. They haven't gotten usage. Duke Johnson handled every single carry last week. So like Duke, and then Gibson, yeah, Freeman, exactly what you said. In this matchup, really the only thing that's been slowing down Gibson is the fact that when Washington gets behind, which happens quite often, they go to JD McKissick. I think JD McKissick, I want to say he had 11 targets by halftime. Like the team had 21 targets at halftime last week against the Lions of all people, and McKissick had 11 of them. So if you just have a situation where you have a relatively normal game script, which could happen this week in what's projected to be a tight game, then you have Gibson running a few more routes, because that's really been the struggle. He hasn't gotten over 30% of the routes per drop back, that far over it very consistently. But he does look like that number 1 back, when they're in close to the goal line. So the less passing situations they could be in, the better it is going to be for Gibson.
All right, Jeff, we have had Sean and Chris here talk about how they like Duke Johnson. I believe that you are relatively down on Duke Johnson this week. The drama on the show. Talk to us about why you are down on him.
Yeah, I guess we're watching different things. By the way, JD McKissick, 29 targets over the last 2 weeks. He now has 61 on the season. Only Kamara has more. That's crazy. 29 targets. That is unbelievable. Last week, I was like, oh, he couldn't see. There's no way he sees 15 again. Well, I was right. He saw 14. So there you go. But yeah, Duke Johnson, man, I called him a poor man's Giovanni Bernard. Gio, if you're watching or listening, I'm sorry, bro. That maybe I offended you. I don't see what everybody else is seeing. In fact, I think I'm seeing what all the coaching staffs have seen with Duke Johnson over the course of his career since the U. Nobody has believed in him as an early down runner. And I mean, last week was why. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't generate anything after contact. He seemingly couldn't find the hole. I don't know if I buy into it. You can have volume. Yeah, sure. He can give you an Adrian Peterson line. He could have 20 carries for 40 yards. The volume's not worth it. Even in this matchup with the Patriots running back or the linebackers are so slow. He should, in theory, be a good play. I'm just not willing to go that far with him. So I put him on my list. I also have Ronald Jones because we've been there before. We follow up the big Ronald Jones game with a Leonard Fournette, or as I'm calling him, Leonard Forget game. Either way, I don't know if we're going to see it against the Rams. That's really what it comes down to. The Rams are, earlier in the season, they gave up that decent game to Zeke, the bigger game to Miles Sanders. But since then, they've held pretty much most of the backfields with the exception of maybe San Francisco in check. So I just don't know if we're going to see a repeat performance. And sometimes people will overlook matchups and try to chase last week's results. So I wouldn't recommend doing that with Ron Jones.
Sean, who are you low on?
I am low on Derrick Henry this week. He's my RB5. Obviously, you're playing him season long, but DFS, he's 8K. And, you know, the O-line has been struggling ever since the Taylor Lewan injury. You know, Henry has a brutal 2-game stretch coming up where he's at Baltimore, who are first in DVOA versus the run, and then at Indy, who are second in run in DVOA. So, you know, the Titans are 7-point dogs here. This isn't an ideal game script for Henry. Plus, Jeremy McNichols and Deontay Foreman have been eating into his workload, which has been frustrating to say the least. So I think, you know, just lower expectations the next 2 games. And then after that, the schedule opens up and we can expect another monster December from Henry. So, you know, it's kind of have to weather the storm right now. And the other guy is Jonathan Taylor, who, you know, I sounded the alarm on a couple weeks ago, but this makes 3 straight games now where Jordan Wilkins has outcarried Taylor and Nyheim Hines outcarried them both this week. His passing usage hit rock bottom at 20%. So, you know, there just isn't any encouraging signs. He's a must sit right now. I have him as RB31. Until we see any sort of signs of life, we have to keep him on our bench in season long.
Yeah, each week, Jonathan Taylor presents new buy low opportunities. Eventually, this guy's going to be dead, and we're still going to be talking about this is the week to buy low on Jonathan Taylor. So it's painful for everyone who is invested in him, to say the least. Raybon, who are you low on?
So it was going to be between Derrick Henry, James Robinson, and Aaron Jones for me. You know, all 3 going against pretty tough matchups on paper. But I'm going to go Aaron Jones here. The reason is late in that Baltimore New England game the other night, we saw Brandon Williams go down for Baltimore. He's a key run defender for them. So could be a little bit easier, I think, for Henry. And then with Robinson, I mean, Chris Thompson has gone down and Robinson's literally gotten every backfield carry and run almost every route when Thompson's not around. So those 2 guys may still get there based on volume. But Aaron Jones, we still have been seeing, you know, even with Tyler Ervin going out of the game last week, Jamal Williams still kind of being that 1B. And you're in a tough matchup against the Indianapolis Colts here, who, you know, have played just very good defense all year. Cause I don't think their offense is actually that great. They may be better with Pittman, you know, being healthy, but you know, Derrick Henry kind of an empty 19 for 103 last week. And that was the first guy that even surpassed 72 yards against Indianapolis. So if Jones, you know, isn't in on the right snaps and maybe Williams in, or, you know, it could be a situation where he doesn't get the touchdown or he doesn't get, you know, enough catches. So I just think he's a little too expensive up at 72 in this matchup. I would like to see him in the 60s. So he's my RB6 this week.
Raybon, I was a gentleman this time. I let you go first because I was also going to take Aaron Jones. And everything you said, I think is exactly right. Road underdog. He shares the workload with Jamal Williams, and the Colts have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs. I think all the way around a suboptimal situation. I mean, obviously, if you have him in season long, you're starting him. He's still an RB1, but I think he's on the lower end of the RB1 scale this week relative to where we normally see him. Sean, give us the running back prop.
Well, I was going to force us to talk about J.D. Mckissick, but it sounds like we already have some passionate McKissick takes out there. So we're going to go with J.D. Mckissick total receptions this week. You know, Jeff mentioned his insane, I think it's 29 targets past 2 games. And it's actually pretty crazy to think how many points he actually left on the field. He had Alex Smith overthrow him on one that would have been a touchdown. He dropped another near the end zone. So just crazy potential. And also it makes you wonder if he were to miss time, Antonio Gibson would be just a smash RB1. Just any kind of passing usage in this offense with Alex Smith is just fantasy gold. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to cap this right now, but I have his projected receptions at 5.5.
Under.
Oh, okay.
I have it at 4. And then, so this is the way I project these is I start with the quarterback's completions, and then I have the routes projected. And McKissick for the year has run about 58% of their routes to Gibson's 34 and Barber's 6% per dropback. Last 2 games, McKissick's been 76% and 69%. But remember, Washington got behind by, 3 scores to the Giants, and then Washington got behind by 3 scores to the Lions. In a normal game script, which again, we have to kind of project, you expect it to be more in line with his season number, which is about just under 60%. So I have him projected to run 60% of the routes, which is double that of Gibson. And he's projecting out to about 4 catches for me.
I will take, I have a strong under here. Sean, you have it at 5.5. I have it literally projected at 5.4. So clearly I have to go under here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do the same thing. I don't know if they get behind to Cincinnati. I mean, of course, you say that and then it happens. So I just don't necessarily see it happening here. I still buy into Washington's defense. I mean, Chase Young has kind of come back to the pack a little bit after a really good start to the season, but the secondary is a little bit better than advertised. So I think that, if we do see a game where they're at least close, sort of neutral setup early, or if they get out to a lead, that's going to take that out of the mix here for Alex Smith. And that's a big line. Anytime you see a running back at 5.5 receptions, usually for me, it's an easy under. I'll make the play under no matter what here, though.
Yeah, to be fair, my projection is 5.2, but I can't offer 5.2 as an over/under. That's why I moved it up to 5.5. But even if you look at week 5 when Alex Smith came in relief, I think half of his targets were to J.D. McKissick. I think it's really an Alex Smith thing. So I'm probably overweighting that a bit. But yeah, I would say 5.5 is. I would take your guys' action on the under here. I think he will go over.
Yeah, that's what scares me. Like, this feels like an Alvin Kamara line where you look at 5.5 and you're like, oh, that's a really high number, but there's no way you feel you can safely bet the under because he's Alvin Kamara. And at this point, McKissick, like, he's getting Alvin Kamara pass game treatment, which just seems so unreal to say, but it feels like that's where we are.
Sean, I was going to ask you, do you think the books will also open this line at 5.5?
I would say 5.5 with the under being like minus 150.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Definitely
Or 4.5 with the over being minus 150. But
no.
I think 5 receptions would be, the projection here.
Yeah.
And I mean, just look at how many he's hauled in. I mean, 28 targets, but he's only caught half of them, which is really low for running back. So this is just a tricky projection. That's why I wanted to float this out there.